Hello and welcome to another episode of Remote Pair Programming. We are continuing our journey into Tests That Tell a Story. Our idea today is to continue with the count statements. So, Bastien, what do you have in mind to do for today?
Hi, I'd like to finish the feature we started last time because right now it's not fully implemented, and well, it will be very hard to keep implementing new features if we don't finish this. So let's finish what we did with the Spark framework, and then we'll see what we have and how we can implement the statement printing.
All right, so let's get going. We have here the list of things that we need to do. So now we look at the Spock tests, if they work.
So we had two set of tests. We had some tests on the account. I can run them. And these tests were correctly implemented. So we are quite happy with the way we left things last time, at least I am. And then we had tests on the account statement, which still require a lot of work, or at least some work, because right now the first test is just not correct.
We tried something out.
We actually used it as a guiding test for writing other tests on account test. So it's okay if it's in this state. Maybe we should have ignored this test, but it doesn't really matter. Now we can maybe focus on making this one pass with what we really want to sell. So right now, in this test, we have an account on which we perform several operations. We deposit money and withdraw some different amount of money. And in the end, we get a statement. And right now, it's just not a valid statement, because if we go to the toString method of account statement, it just returns something hard-coded. So we want to change this.
Yes.
So this one needs work, and the other test, I don't remember. It has the very same problem, I think.
Yeah, we played around with it and tried to make the simplest thing work.
Yes. So maybe we start with the first one?
Yeah, let's do that.
And so we deposit, withdraw. So we should have in the end, what do we want here in our expecting table?
You're asking in the statement or in the
yes. So
line?
Right now we need to write a correct where, because this one is just has no sense.
Yes.
So I'm not really sure what we want to get with this test, because my memory is a bit fuzzy from last time, and I think I need some help to make sure that we are testing what we want.
So we wanted to have one line statement with the header. I'm looking at the requirements. We need a date, credit, debit, that's wrong there, and balance. So it's not amount, it's credit or debit. This is how it's formulated. And then balance is what remained after the credit or the debit of the account.
Okay. Maybe we can start with changing the name of amount. What would you want? Well, it can be either credit or debit, so what do we call it?
So this is the idea. In the requirements, both are there. And if you have a credit, then it
Okay.
will be something that value will be put there, and there's nothing in the debit. So they're
Okay.
both credit and debit.
Okay. Yes, I remember that. Let me switch to the previous test we had. This was something like, no, actually, we did not implement this here.
No.
Okay, so let's write this.
So the date is, well, fine, let's say.
Yes.
But then instead of amount, I would put credit and debit. Yes, exactly. And the balance remains. So if it's credit, then you put a pipe with nothing. Or with 0, I don't know. I don't know if you need something or not.
We need something, yes.
So it's 0. And then it should be like that.
This, I think we said. So I'm just a bit annoyed here because we have this huge setup here, and here we are just actually having one statement. So actually we are not checking anything that is linked to our test here.
Exactly, yeah.
So maybe first we need to write a very simple test with just one deposit, and then we'll write some more complex tests with more operations with a statement on many lines.
Yeah. That test is definitely not clear. It's the kind of a test that doesn't tell a story.
Yeah, exactly. So let's make it simpler by just having a deposit of, I don't know, let's say 50. Then here, I think that we don't really need all these inputs here because we only want, we will only have maybe date, or maybe we hard code it, I don't know, and credit and or debit, and balance is something that we don't want to set, because this is not something that we can set into the account. This is something that will be calculated. So I think that this column here needs to be removed.
Okay.
And we just have credit, which means that when we have 10 credit, we have to make a deposit, and when we have debit, we have to make a withdrawal. Or maybe we can keep the balance so that we define an initial balance for the account and make an initial deposit. It really depends on how complex we want our test to be.
I would say simpler is better, right?
So let's start with the balance, and
yeah.
And we'll see if we want to add it later.
Yeah.
And yeah, we could do this. And so we want to deposit credit and withdraw debit. And the date will be hard coded right now. And so I would expect this test to pass, except that here we would need a balance of 10. Does this seem correct for you?
Okay. Yeah. I understand, yeah.
Now let's run the test, it should fail. No, actually, I don't think that it can work, because I'm performing two operations, and I think that we should have two different statement lines. If I do these two operations here, that cannot work.
So what if we do something else that would be, I think, more logical. Just make a deposit, just make an assert, a simple assert, saying that at the date, and also just in a way we need to pass the date towards the system under test as well. And the assert would be that this will be the statement when we put that credit, when we took that much credit out of the account. And what I would do, I'd write in the account or somewhere to have something like a log of payments. So the system will have the date that we set here, and for each withdrawal and each deposit, it will write somewhere. And then we ask the account, give me, for now, let's say, give me all the transactions, all the log transactions.
Okay. If we do that, do you still want to use Spock, or do we use some usual tools?
For that, I don't think we need Spock.
Yes. Okay. So let's write this test. You're talking about.
I think Spock was useful for the others, for the detailed tests. And it's a good option for having tests that really tell a story in a table manner. It's really nice.
So the story would be when I deposit some money on my account, I can get a log of the operations performed. So maybe we can write something better later. Just now I'm going to revert this file, and we'll see if we want to keep this later or not. Okay, so I can't have both classes named this way. Let's rename this one into
Just put anything there. So we're aiming towards a transaction log. That's what we want to test.
yeah. So we were saying we have an account. How do we want to get the logs of this account?
Well, I was thinking that we should inject something like a logger to the account, and each time the account will do a withdrawal or a deposit, it will write there in the log, and then we just ask the logger.
Okay. So we'll have something like logger logged, and we want this to contain something.
Yes, exactly. So if we'll say something like logger logs all, or all logs, I don't know, then it will give us everything for the account since ever.
So this would be a transaction logger.
Mm-hmm.
And let's create this class right now. I can put it here and move it later. Then we want the let's say a list and logged operation would be something like a list of something, of logs.
Yeah.
I don't know.
For now, I would say that the simplest logger would be for an account that didn't do any operation. So an empty list would be
Okay.
the simplest thing possible. So now if we just give the logger to an account, this is what should happen. It should be empty.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we need to change this.
Yes.
We'll set no default value for now. Before I do this, I need to move this into the
Yeah. Yeah,
right
because
directory.
otherwise you put those.
Yeah. Actually, I'm going to default it with a new transaction logger. This way I don't have to change all the calls.
Yeah.
It will be a number, and let's call it logger for now.
All right.
Okay, so I think that I've completely failed my refactoring since all my files have been changed. Yes, exactly. Thank you. So I'll just cancel this thing and try again.
But you did something weird there.
Yes, I think I'm going to do this manually because sometimes it's better. Be sure of what you do. Okay. So this way, if we don't put a logger, we'll have one provided by default by the system. Okay. So this seems to be compiling, but it is still red. I don't know why.
Well, I don't think it's empty.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I have to specify some type here. So let's put this into
empty. Can this be just empty?
I think I have to do this.
Okay. Yeah.
And here I have to give it some type, and we haven't defined anything, so I'm going to put anything inside this thing. And this should be enough. Okay. So this test is maybe not this story. This is more like for a new account.
There are no transactions. Great.
So maybe now we can put some transaction in the...
Yeah. For an account with one, do we want to specify if we credited or debited the account, or it doesn't matter?
I think that it depends on what we want to test. Do we want to test that operations are logged, or do we want to test how operations are logged and what kind of operation we expect when we do an operation?
Yeah, it's true.
So
yeah, then I think it should be a good idea to specify. So for withdrawal, so first of all with deposit, because we need to deposit, otherwise we cannot withdraw. There is a deposit transaction or something like that in the logs, or logged. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
It's the same, but we just need to put to call account deposit, put some money there. Okay, and now the list should be something So in this moment, we know that we should have the, what should we log? We should log that we put 30, but also the date.
Yes.
And also the final, how is it called? The balance, the balance.
Yeah.
So that's what I would put at least. Maybe the type of transaction, do we put that as well? Like date, deposit, I don't know.
We can try. It would be something like date.
Yes.
Deposit 30 and 30.
Yes.
And so transaction already exists. Oh.
There we are.
Okay, so we already have it. So let's choose this.
Yeah, but it's just yet another order.
Yes. So balance, transaction type, and
it's a debit.
It's debit. Sorry, I always mixed them.
And then we need the date that we will also need to inject to the account.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to create something here, and
yeah.
Actually, I think that we wrote a builder to avoid calling all these constructors of money in some previous tests we had.
Yeah, I think we did, but I don't remember how.
We have money builder here.
Oh yeah.
So let's use this one. Someone, great. Okay. And so you said that we need to inject the date into the account somehow. And this would be a local date. Here. Something like this. How do we want to inject the date into the account?
Well, that's a good question, but I would put pasta to the constructor.
Okay. What makes you choose the account instead of the logger?
So if I pass the date to the account or to the logger, that's what you mean?
Yeah, you pick one. Why is it?
Yeah, probably logger is better. Because account isn't using it, we'll just pass it along, so it will be complicated. Yeah, I think logger should receive the date.
Same question. Why more logger than account?
Sorry?
Same question. Why do you choose logger and not account?
Because logger is using it, and if I would use the account, then it would mean that every time when I log what happens in the account, I would need to have the date. And that means that all the account and the logger both will depend on the date. So that means more coupling.
Okay.
Now, if only the logger depends on the date, that means less coupling.
Yes. Nice. Thank you. I would have picked logger too, because I wasn't thinking about in terms of coupling, but more in terms of responsibility.
Yeah.
Like I don't think that account really needs to hold this responsibility. Okay, so we want to have a logger and well, yeah, maybe we pass the date into the constructor. Yeah. I don't really see how this can be a real use case where you would really have a logger for your date. Like maybe you would have something like more another class that provides you the dates for you.
Yes, that could be. So, well, the idea is the date, it's problematic because it's impossible to test without having without injecting the date when you have a logger. And there's also another situation where we'd like to have maybe more transactions in more dates. So then we'll need to change the date, and the date will need to change there as well as a reference. So I don't know how Kotlin works with this from this point of view. If we inject the date and then if we change the date, will that remain as a reference or as a value?
I think that local date is, let's check, but I think it's not a mutable object. So it's just, I don't think that we can change the values once we have created the date.
So then there's an issue with that.
We can't, yeah, well, if we want to change the value of date, we can't.
So then what we need to have, we need to have something like a date provider that the transaction logger always calls, and we can reinstantiate a local date there.
Yes, that probably would be a design that allows for more change and more features later. Right now, it would be too big a step for me to do.
Yeah, exactly. But I was thinking a bit where you should go.
Okay, so let's implement date, and maybe then we decide if we want to implement this date provider or not. So something like this would be fine.
Yeah, in fact, that's the idea. We could inject the date provider, so in a way we encapsulate the date in the date provider. And then you just re-instantiate the date in the date provider. This is typical idea of coupling. Again, here we have more surface of coupling. That's the idea. But if you inject here a layer like the date provider, then you have less surface of coupling. I think in Java or in C#, because the date is mutable, you don't have this issue. But when you start having immutable state, then you really need to have a better design.
Yes, and actually I would say that I like to have this kind of issue because
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it forces you to a better design.
Yes. So we need a date here too.
Yes.
Let's just put one. Okay, so I think that right now our test is what we want it to be, and we can maybe now just implement it. It should fail. Oh yes. Haha.
No value passed.
Yes, because
okay.
We have default transaction.
Yeah, but can't you just take the date of the system and that's all?
Yes, we can do that, and I am not tempted to move this constructor call into transaction logger because I don't want here to have some coupling of how transaction logger works with account.
Yeah.
So I'd like something like transaction logger default, maybe, and give me a default transaction logger. I don't want to know how you build it.
Okay, so have a builder.
So I'll have something like this, and here I can put the date of the system. I don't know if I can. I don't know how I can get the local date. No, easy to use. Okay.
Sounds good.
So now the test should fail for the right reason. So here again we had this problem like during our first session, I think, where it's barely readable and it's comparing references also. So let's make the transaction class a data class. So this way we have the equals implemented, and
yeah, it should be a data anyway, so
we should have a more readable log message.
but again, this is so much easier than in Java.
Yes. Okay, so let's make the test pass. Back to our test, and when we do a deposit, so here we want to do something, maybe just a simple implementation without thinking.
Yeah. Log.
So balance has been computed here.
Money.
Transaction type is deposit. Sorry, debit.
Yes.
Date.
We don't need a date anymore
Okay.
because it passed it, so we need to remove that.
Yes, so maybe here we implement a facade because we don't create the transaction here, we'll create it in the transaction log.
Yeah. So just give money, debit, and
I don't remember the last one.
It was balance.
And the amount, of course, of the transaction. Okay. So let's create this thing. Money, balance. Transaction type. And I'm going to put debit because right now that is what we are doing, and then we'll discuss about this. And this should add a new transaction with balance, transaction type, the date, and debit. So let's run the test again. And it is okay.
Yeah. It's interesting that you wrote the method like that, because I was thinking if it's not from the idea of telling a story, it's not easier for the user to have a method saying log debit and another one log credit instead of saying log this money, debit money.
Actually, that's my next step. Yeah. That's what I wanted to talk about, because right now I was just focused on making the test pass the fastest way. And here I have two options for log. I can, and this is why the first one I had was debit when I named it here. So I see that I have two options here. I can do one log method with something like amount here, and give the transaction type here, or I can, and I would like to do this, refactor the code so that I can have something like log debit, that would be balance, money, and debit, money, and that's it. And I want to replace this implementation here, and I can implement it this way. And now I think that if I replace in my account log with log debit and remove the debit, my test should still work. And this is the design I want to have.
There is this concept, what we're doing now, it's called the humane interface, and you have two options when you do APIs. One option is to do this humane interface when you prefer having more methods with less options. So you do something like log debit, log credit, log I don't know, whatever. And then the other option is what's called minimal interface, when you do log and give all the options. The advantage for this one is that it's easier to read, but then whenever you need to do something more, you add another method. So if you have 100, 150, then it's becoming very difficult. With the other one, it's less difficult. It's more difficult to read, where you have many options. It's more difficult to understand. But when you have many options, it's easier because you just have maybe 5 methods and put there all the options. It's always in contrast.
Yes, I really like to have to see at least that I have these 2 options, because sometimes we just make the choice without even realizing that we have it. And when you have it, I tend to optimize for readability, but then again, I think that I keep on going this way until I have too many methods, and then I switch to the other paradigm. So it really depends on the situation. I wouldn't say always pick this
Yeah,
strategy.
exactly. But I think in this case it makes sense, because how many methods can you have? 2, 3?
Yes, yes. And so now I can remove this one. Okay. So now maybe we can implement some more tests on the transaction with what? Withdrawal, maybe. That should be something very similar.
But the idea is that if we want to withdraw, we need to deposit. So that's why
Yes.
probably we'll have 2 items in the log.
Yes, so let's not just do that. And for an account with an initial deposit,
We
well,
withdraw some money. Yeah, when we withdraw some money, there are 2 deposits. No, there are
2 transaction logs
2 transaction logs.
for each operator. Well, yeah, that's enough.
Yeah.
I think. So I'll have something like my deposits and withdraw. So I like that when I'm writing a second test, I see an opportunity to refactor the first one, because actually here it's not really easy to read.
Yeah.
And so I want to move this at least in a variable. That would be like my deposit transaction.
That's a deposit transaction, yeah.
This one is easier to read. And so now I'll have a deposit transaction and a withdrawal transaction. That would be a balance of 20 credit and 10.
Yes.
And now I would expect that I have my deposit and my withdrawal. No, I would like them to be this one and maybe in a precise order. So exactly. Oh yes, by default contain exactly. Also check the order of the elements.
Yes.
So I'm happy with this one. I have the deposit and the withdrawal transaction. Okay, so let's run the test. It should fail. And this is pretty straightforward to fix, I think.
We just need to log the withdrawal.
And I'm going to put this here, and then we can ask ourselves what should appear when a transaction actually has been made but failed. Do we want this to appear in the logs? Because
No.
it could be, why not?
No, not like that. You
Okay.
might want to say failed transaction, so you need a flag probably. And especially not with the changed balance.
I don't want this. I don't want the operation to appear like it has been a successful credit or debit, but maybe then this calls for another kind of transaction. Like right now we have two types of transaction. Maybe we need a third one.
Yes.
And so let's just implement this feature and see if we want to try and write a test for this case. I'm going to beat tab and then we refactor. Okay, so here, well, maybe in this case it's just not, it's not very useful, but we have a lot of duplication between line 10 and 14, and we could remove it. How do you feel about this?
Yes. First of all, the constructor.
Yeah.
But then...
Actually, there is just this thing that is changing between the two lines.
Yes.
So maybe, well, I'm going to write a log method that has 3 parameters and see how things work first. I think I have to do something like this if I want. That would be log. Yes. Okay.
Yep.
And you were talking about how we can decide on something that is easy to read or easy to, how do you call it already? Human interface and
humane interface and minimal interface is the other one. Well, you give parameters.
And so here we have the minimal interface that is private and the human interface that is exposed.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so what do we do next? Do we want to try to log a fake transaction, maybe?
Yeah, let's do that. And then at the last, after that, I would try to see if everything works with with more transactions. Like.
Okay. Do you want to try to do some more transaction before?
No. Let's try with the failing one.
Okay. So that would be for an account that has not enough money. When we try to withdraw some money, we get a failure transaction log, something like this.
Failure transaction log, yes.
No, that would be transaction failure log. So my test has long name. Maybe we can shorten it a bit because maybe this is just when we try to withdraw more money than we have. Okay, this is better. I'm not very happy with this because this is So actually, this is kind of a coupling of the name of the test with how we are going to implement it.
Yeah, I would go to simpler terms. Something like a record is kept, a failure record is kept. Because if I would think about the business, the user, they don't remember, they don't know about logs. They know that there's a record.
Yes, absolutely. So this would be rather simple. We create an account and we try to withdraw some money. And then do you want to call this a failure record? What is a failure record? Is it a transaction or is it something else?
I think it should keep all the transaction data, but also the message of failure. So it wouldn't be different than a deposit or withdrawal log, but you also need the reason of failure.
Okay, so
all the data that you have already, but also put there a message or an object about the failure object that will have an ID and a message. So typically how this happened is that you don't create especially in complex systems like in banks, you'd have a catalog of error codes with their messages. And then when you create a failure record, you just put their error code 1257. And everybody knows that error code 1257 is for not enough money in the debit account.
Okay. We have different possibilities here.
Yeah.
And just writing the test, we are already going to make a few choices.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about them before I write anything. Failure record can be a transaction or can own a transaction or can be something that is also a transaction. Like maybe we could have a record, and a record can be a transaction or can be a failure record. So I see at least these three options. Maybe we have more.
As far as I know, I'm not a specialist here, but I might say something stupid. But as far as I know, transactions are only those that came to a success.
Mm-hmm. So that would be something completely different.
Yes.
Okay. And then that would be like all the fields we said. So we will have the current balance would be 0. So by the way, maybe I should first make a deposit.
Yeah.
To have something more realistic.
Yes. So reading a bit says that a failed transaction is when the account gets debited but the payment is not registered.
Oh, that's bad.
So that's a failed transaction.
So that would be something like this. like we have a deposit transaction of 10
Yeah.
and then a failure record of 100. So let's create this thing. So that would be balance, transaction type, date, and the amount. So, which I'm not going to make this right now. I can just run the test and they should fail. And at this point, we need to see what kind of link, if we want any, between transaction and failure record.
Yeah, that I don't know about this really. I really don't know.
We don't have to. Right now,
I have no clue.
So I would be tempted to do something like have the concept of record, and a record can be either a transaction or a failure record. And it's just a concept. It has nothing to, it is nothing, like it's an empty object, just to constrain my records and say, okay, so in my transaction logs, I can have different kind of records and they can be this kind of data, and that's all. I wouldn't try to mutualize balance, date, and all these things between the recorded transaction because it's only duplicated twice, and right now I'm not really sure whether I want to bind strongly those two concepts. And somehow I feel that it would be a bad idea too.
I don't know either. That's why I'm saying I don't have any proof that it should be in a way or another. So just leave it in somehow, and maybe if we add more pressure to it, more tests, we'll see how things go. But I have no clue how it should be.
So let's make the test pass, and then we'll see how we can actually make it compile, because right now I'm going to have to get to the account, and here when I do a withdraw, so you said that we'd like to have the message because we don't have the code.
Yeah, exactly.
So we have two different cases. I'm going to make a demo implementation and then we'll see.
Yeah.
So here I need a new method because I don't have anything that allows me to do that correctly. So that would be log failure for balance, how much I try to withdraw, and the reason of the failure. So actually, I'm just going to implement this here. So I said log failure, but actually it's more like log credit failure, because it can only happen when withdrawing some money.
Yes. Yeah, I was thinking if we have debit failures, we might, but not now. We didn't implement anything about it.
And so here we will need to add on logs a new failure record with money, credit, date and the message. So I'm going to change amount into credit here, and I didn't add the message parameter. And so if I go back in my test, here, I have to decide what kind of message I get. So I have the daily limit and the simple withdrawal operation fail. So I'm going to pick this one because I implemented this one.
Yeah.
And we'll see if we want to have a test for the other one or not. I'm surprised that it's compiling.
Why shouldn't it compile?
Oh yes, because I didn't put any type here. Okay, I thought my all logs list were a list of transaction, but actually we can put anything we want in this thing. So my test should pass now. Of course they are not passing because my failure record class is not a data class, and we also don't save any member. We probably want them.
Though if we do that, it's a duplication with the other one, right?
Yes. I am missing something. I can't see. So failure record. Oh, message class cannot be compared. Let's change this. Still not passing. So it says that I don't have the expected message. Yes, of course, because I completely got wrong things here. And so I made the message class a data class, but actually since all my messages are static, I can only have one reference, and this is not,
Okay.
I don't need to do this. No, I still want to do this because I get a more clear error message when something fails. It's easier to understand why it is failing. So I'm going to keep this, but this was not necessary to make the test pass. Okay, so we have one case implemented here. We still are storing pretty much anything we want in our logs, like we can store just bad stuff. So I don't like to have this anything here.
Yeah, that's a bit too wide, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
We could put an umbrella object or an interface or something like that, right?
Yes, I think that would be, I would be happy with this. So maybe we can go to the transaction class, and yes, we can actually move the failure record class to the transaction class here. And what we can do is a serial class that would be a record. And this way, we can have both transaction and failure record data are record, and no one else outside this file can be of type record. So
Yeah.
this way I'm sure that if someone wants to add a new record,
They will add it here.
yes, they will add it here and they will read this
Okay.
this way. And so maybe I can just rename this file into record. And now I can go back to my transaction logger and store records here instead. Once my tests are passing. Okay, that's better. We could still do something like in the implementation of account here. It's hard to change the message because we have duplication. We could have a local variable to avoid this duplication, but well, I'm not really sure it's really helpful.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not seeing something that's bothering me there.
Okay, let's keep it this way. We could do the other case with the withdrawal daily limit, but I don't know if it's really interesting because actually the way we have implemented it is wrong. Because right now we are just checking that one withdrawal cannot exceed the withdrawal daily limit, but maybe we can do several small withdrawals and this way exceed the daily limit. So this would be an interesting.
It's not a withdrawal daily limit, it's a withdrawal transaction limit.
Yes.
That's the reason.
Yes. So we can continue and implement other logs, but I don't think that we will do anything more interesting. So I would like to try something else now.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
You said you wanted to try to write a test on many transactions, a lot of transactions.
Yes, so try to have more transactions and really see like a log, like what you do in, I don't know, a weekly log. I don't know, 5, 6, 7 payments, something.
Okay. So let's write this test and talk about this once it's passing. What is the story of this test?
Let's say something like that. Transaction log for a week. Oh, how do you say that? When I check my transactions after a week, I see, I don't know. I see them. I don't know. That's what a user would do, right? I say I want to see what did I do. So
yeah, let's keep it this way for now. So something like this. Expected records. Something. Okay, so I probably have some parentheses problem here, but okay. So, first this one. And now I have to do some math. so at this point I have 100 and I add 30. Okay, that should be something like this. And if this is passing, now my question is, so this is not passing.
Okay, this is
me not doing this correctly, but
difficult to read. Withdraw. So what is it expecting the last one? 300.
So it didn't find the last 4.
Debit, credit.
Oh yes, completely, because here I get 40. Because I don't know why I had 100. Then I get 40, 40, something like this. So could you explain me why you wanted to write this test?
Because I think it's a good preparation to the other test with print, where you'd like to print a statement for more transactions, and I wanted to see if this works.
Okay. Usually I don't write a test that I cannot make fail.
Yeah.
So I don't see any case where this one would fail and one of those two would not fail.
Usually I almost never write. This is the case where I do write because it's closely related to the end goal of printing the statement.
Okay. So this is more like you want to start to build the story of what's going to happen next.
Yes.
Okay.
Because on top of it, you'll put a printer. And if you put a printer on top of something that you didn't check, then it's possible that you don't know where it's coming from. But if now we put a printer on top and it doesn't work, it's clear that it's not from here and it's from the printer. So I try always to isolate the new things that I put on the top.
Okay, nice. Do we want to do something more about this transaction logs?
I don't know. We can do many refactorings, I guess.
Yeah. Yes, because we have some namings that are just not correct. Like we have this transaction loggers, but actually it's logging records, so maybe it should be renamed. Well, we still have the old Groovy test that of account statement that, not this one, but this one that has no meaning, so we should rework this. But
yeah,
well,
maybe next time we'll do a lot of rework, refactoring, rethinking, renaming, and put things into place.
Yes, we can do this. Do we want to do anything more on the statement printing?
Well, for the statement printing, we need a printer. That's the thing that we do need to do a bit more.
Yes, exactly.
But maybe it's better to stop here, do the printer, and clean up next time.
Yes, I think that this way we'll be able to start a bit easier.
Yeah.
Not to have to remind everything that we've done. previous time.
So do you want to do anything more, or can we debrief?
No, I'd like to debrief now. That's fine with me.
Okay. Okay, so we're almost there with implementing the whole thing in this manner of tests that tell a story. Today we wrote the stories of that are a bit more on the top of the transactions. We are logging the transactions, and then we see how the logs look like. I reminded myself, and we talked a bit about this idea of humane interface versus minimal interface. And I think this is a very interesting and useful concept that I am using when I'm teaching API design and or microservices workshops, because it helps a lot. And it helps you understand what do you want. And as always with design, you need to choose. You need to choose in between options, and sometimes some options are better, sometimes other options are better, but you never have the silver bullet, right? I think it's a very nice way. There's a lot to read on Martin Fowler's blog about humane interface and minimal interface, and in many other places as well. So how about you? How was this?
I really enjoyed this session. I really like that we at least 2 times we had to stop when we were writing our test to talk about design. And I love when this happens, because it really shows that writing tests is really the hard part, and this is where you make choices. And I like that we realized that we were making choices, because this is not something that we always do. Sometimes we rush to writing a test and don't realize that actually when we write the test this way, we are making a big decision. And so today it was really obvious that we were doing this, and I really enjoyed these times. I also liked that we went some direction, and then somehow when we wrote more code, we saw that this was not the best direction we could have taken. Like we have something that is called transaction log, but that should be not named this way. This is something else. And at first we didn't really know what it would be, and now it's more clear because we have written more tests and written more code, and we have learned more about the domain and how we see this. Yes, I always enjoy leading this thing, because this is really what I think software development is: learning by doing. And yes, I always struggle trying to explain this to people that don't write code or that don't live this, because this is really when you do this that you realize that this is some part of the nature of what we do.
I think you mentioned something very interesting about taking decisions and knowing that you take them. That's this idea of being very deliberate. I find it very difficult to teach to people, or to even explain it to many programmers, because quite often design happens, and then when I ask why did you take this decision, it's like, I don't know, it just happened. So that's not deliberate, that's just a design that happens. I don't really like it when that happens, because sometimes it can go well, sometimes not. Sometimes people have the instinct and say, I don't know exactly why I did that, but I chose this option. From my experience, it was the good one. But the instinct is sometimes good and sometimes it's not good. So
yes, I really think it's a very important topic, making sure that you are doing something because you have chosen to do it. And also, I think that the more you train yourself, the more choices you see, and the more choices you can take. Like when you make a decision and you don't know why, it's maybe because you didn't know about alternatives.
Yes.
And if you've trained yourself enough, then you see that at this point you can take through path, and then it's more obvious that you have to choose something.
And you almost always have options. If anyone tells you that this is the only option, it's either that they're lying or they don't know better. So you always have options. Sometimes they might be weird because you haven't used that, or weird because they are really weird, but you always have options.
Yes, I really find this exercise of before you make a choice, name 3 solutions.
Yes.
It's really cool, and doing it with a team when you're working on production code is actually really helpful.
Yeah. I think I wrote a few years back a blog post calling Solution Seeker. So
Yes.
you seek at least 3 solutions before starting anything. I used it sometimes especially for junior programmers or very senior programmers. That's where I think it's very useful.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's all for me.
Okay, then thank you so much for pairing with me today, and until next time, as always, have fun coding.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.